The finale of Your Friends and Neighbors Season 2 doesn't end with justice, redemption, or even certainty. Instead, it ends with a warning. Every lie eventually creates another lie, and every secret demands a price. By the time the season closes, Coop and everyone around him have crossed lines they can never fully uncross, even if they convince themselves they had no choice. The central question of the finale revolves around Ash's death. At first, Ash appears dead after collapsing during the confrontation. Faced with a body on the floor and terrified of another criminal investigation, Coop, Barney, and Nick immediately shift into survival mode. Rather than calling the police, they begin calculating how to protect themselves. What makes the situation morally devastating is that nobody involved starts as a criminal mastermind. They're frightened people making terrible decisions out of panic. Every choice pushes them deeper into guilt. The irony is that Ash wasn't actually dead. Just when the men think they've committed to covering up a death, Ash suddenly wakes up during the transport. The situation turns into another violent struggle that ends when Nick crashes the Escalade into a lake while trying to avoid a deer. This time, Ash truly dies. The group then stages the scene to look like an accident, placing Ash behind the wheel and leaving the vehicle submerged in the water. Technically, Ash's final death is accidental, but morally the three men know they're responsible for everything that happened afterward. That burden becomes the secret binding them together. The episode repeatedly emphasizes that the real turning point isn't Ash's death, it's the decision to hide it. Coop, Barney, and Nick spend most of the season convincing themselves they're decent people trapped in difficult situations. The cover-up destroys that illusion. The Benjamin Franklin quote Coop recalls, "Three can keep a secret if two of them are dead," becomes the finale's thesis. The secret itself is now more dangerous than the death. That's why Nick begins unraveling almost immediately. He sweats through conversations, panics whenever Ash's name comes up, and eventually explodes into a public fight with Barney. And like Coop and Barney, Nick seems unable to compartmentalize what happened. The secret is already poisoning the group from within. One of the most emotional storylines involves Ash's daughter. Throughout the season, Ash is portrayed as manipulative, dangerous, and deeply flawed, yet the finale refuses to reduce him to a monster. His daughter openly admits that she both loved and hated him. That contradiction is important because it mirrors one of the season's larger themes. People are rarely entirely good or entirely bad. She understands that Ash caused harm, but he was still her father. When Coop talks to her about grief, he's really talking about himself too. He knows that losing someone doesn't erase the complicated emotions attached to them. Love and resentment can exist simultaneously. Her departure from town symbolizes the closing of Ash's chapter, even while the adults remain trapped in the consequences of his life and death. Samantha's storyline highlights another major theme of the finale: exhaustion. After years of scandals, suspicion, tragedy, and public judgment, she no longer believes the wealthy social world around her is worth saving. She recognizes something Coop is only beginning to understand. The community they inhabit rewards appearances more than honesty. People are welcomed when they succeed and discarded when they become inconvenient. Samantha's decision to leave isn't an act of defeat, it's an attempt to escape a cycle that keeps consuming everyone connected to it. Her comment about there always being another elephant perfectly captures the show's worldview. Every crisis eventually gives way to another crisis. There is never a final victory. The most surprising emotional development comes from Coop and Mel. From much of the series, their marriage seemed irreparable, yet the finale suggests they finally understand what went wrong. Their conversation about the tiny apartment they once shared is revealing. Back then, they had very little money, but were genuinely happy. Over time, they gained wealth, status, and comfort while losing the connection that made those things meaningful. The scene isn't necessarily setting up a reconciliation. Instead, it forces both characters to acknowledge that success came with costs neither of them recognized until it was too late. Mel's willingness to imagine a simpler life contrasts sharply with the world around them, where everyone remains obsessed with money, reputation, and appearances. Allie's advice to Coop may be the most important piece of dialogue in the finale. When she references David Bowie's Turn and Face the Strange, she's challenging Coop to stop running from uncertainty. Throughout the season, Coop constantly reacts to problems rather than confronting deeper truths about himself. He hides, he rationalizes, he survives, but he rarely changes. Allie suggests that growth only happens when people step into the unknown instead of trying to preserve the lives they already have. Her words point toward the possibility that Coop's real journey hasn't even started yet. One of the finale's biggest unresolved mysteries concerns the missing money. Coop believes he has finally done the right thing by returning over $1 billion connected to Ash. He sees it as a chance to reclaim part of his conscience. Then Jack reveals a shocking detail. Not all of that money belonged to Ash. The revelation changes everything. Suddenly, the entire financial scheme becomes larger than anyone realized. It suggests powerful unseen players are still operating behind the scenes, and that Ash may have been only one piece of a much bigger operation. The final image of Mel beginning to write her book is more important than it appears. Earlier, she rejected the idea of turning her family's pain into entertainment. By the end, she starts writing anyway. This doesn't necessarily mean she's exploiting the situation. Instead, it symbolizes truth finally being recorded. Throughout the season, everyone has been lying, to spouses, friends, authorities, and themselves. Mel's book threatens to transform those hidden stories into something permanent. The secret only survives when nobody tells it. Mel is beginning to tell it. The closing moments deliver the finale's most ominous twist. A fisherman discovers Ash's submerged vehicle. For most of the episode, Coop allows himself to believe that maybe he escaped. Maybe the accident was convincing enough. Maybe the secret would stay buried forever. Then the car is found. The discovery confirms what the season has been saying all along. Secrets don't disappear, they wait. The wealthy residents of this community spend their lives managing appearances and controlling narratives, but reality eventually resurfaces, just like Ash's car rising from the depths. The finale leaves us with a powerful irony. Coop spends Father's Day rediscovering moments of genuine happiness with his children and imagining a simpler, more honest future. For the first time in a long time, he feels hopeful. At the exact moment hope returns, the evidence begins emerging from the water. The season ends with Coop believing he might finally be moving toward the truth, while the consequences of his biggest lie are only beginning to surface.